As you said before, and I think it's been ingrained into your head, V, right? Like, is anybody out there on the call today not have more to do than they have time? And don't think about that in your own, in the context of your entrepreneurial life, just in your life. You know, for those of you who are moms, right? Do you wake up in the morning and go, you know, I got all this time to kill, right? We all have more things that we want to do and more to do than we have the time to do it. You know, as an entrepreneur, we always say, in fact, this is a learning module in Learning Community, you know, 100 hours of work in 10 hours of time. And that's just the reality. And you know, one of the things that we'll talk about today in just terms of one of the techniques and kind of harkens me back to the stories of back in the day. You know, we said we were going to reward people for being healthy. We had to build this whole technology platform. We were looking at, you know, 2 years of building to the point where we'd be ready to, you know, generate any real revenue, because we'd build a platform and start selling the health plans and raise money and do all stuff. And so you sit down and you feel like you have just all these things that you have to be able to do at the same time. No different than obviously everybody who's here today. And I'll never forget, I wish I had known this years before. For those of you that have seen the movie Apollo 13 with Tom Hanks, and if you remember the context of the movie, the spaceship's been really severely damaged and they're starting to hurl back to Earth and things aren't going well. And they've got all these things to do. And Kevin Bacon, who's one of the co-pilots of Apollo 13, starts really freaking out. And he's like, what about this? What about this? What about this? What about this? And Tom Hanks says, listen, we need 113 things to go well, right? We're on number 7, work the problem. And it's really underestimated when you are an entrepreneur, the skill of prioritizing and aligning your effort to the things that really matter. And, you know, we as entrepreneurs a lot of times say, well, there's all this stuff and I'm overwhelmed and I can't prioritize. And that's a flaw, right? That's a lack of skill. If you went into IBM or name a big company in September or August or whatever, when they do their strategic planning for the next year, right? And you walked in a room and you said, we're going to do everything next year, they would just escort you out of the building. You know, IBM, like many companies, picks the things that are the most important to do, picks some things it's not going to do, even though sometimes it's going to seem like they should do them or need to do them. So the first thing I want to, you know, use that story and use the context around is prioritizing and aligning your effort to the most important things, including how you manage your day, which we're going to spend some time here on today. Those are skills that you have to develop that if you don't do, you're not as good of an entrepreneur as you can be, right? There are, and I'll use it in the context of motherhood, right? If you're a mom and you're working and you're a mom and you're starting your own business, you've got kids in school and you've got all these things, right? So take 2 moms, you know, why is one mom relatively successful at it and one mom really struggles at it? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is you set priorities and you execute on those priorities, right, in a way that actually helps you achieve what you're trying to achieve. And it sounds very generalistic and cliche, but it's really very true. But I want to start off by saying setting priorities and maximizing your effort is actually a skill. And hopefully one of the things that we're going to talk about today is how do you actually implement that skill. Okay.
Great. And I just want to remind folks that, you know, we really want this to be interactive. So, you know, I think, you know, trying to figure out what's the most important thing for your business and just how do you incorporate priorities into your life. Please feel free to chime in, jump in. We'd love to get into, you know, everybody's specific issues and how we can help you kind of move the needle in this area.
Yeah. And V, I'll try to stop a little more. As you guys probably tell in these sessions, I get pretty passionate about it and get going. And sometimes I don't stop and ask. So I'll try to do that a little bit,
Great.
you know, on the way as we try to do some of this stuff. You know, I think that, you know, when it comes to the normal MO that we have, I know that when earlier in my company, early in the history of my, you know, healthcare company, I had come from being a mergers and acquisitions lawyer for a large New York law firm. And so anybody that, the context of that, there is no, like, it's like, we're going to do $1 billion deal in a week, and it's, work 24 hours a day to do it. So there wasn't, everything was a priority, and the deals were big enough that they just threw armies of people at it. So I almost came from like the worst context. And when, I started building the company, and you're working really, really hard, and you're doing all these different things, and you really don't take the time to, as much as we should, really sit down and go, okay, what's the most important stuff? And so what you really have to start with is, okay, there are certain goals of what you're trying to accomplish with your organization. I'm going to open up a pizza stand, right? And, from those goals, the financial goals that you create, right, a year or 2 year, 3 years, that's super important as a foundation to set your priorities. So if you open one pizza stand, that's one plan. If you open the next Pizza Hut, that's another. In the first one, you might not need financing. In the second one, you'd absolutely need financing. And so your priorities are first and foremost dictated by your goal. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that I think early stage companies make, is the leaders just start working, right? I'm going to go do this. I'm going to launch a website. I'm going to do this. And there are certain things that the priorities dictate based on the goal you're trying to achieve. Now, goals are hard because, right, you don't know exactly what you're going to do, but that's the whole magic of it, is you got to come up with a financial plan, right? And that financial plan says what your revenue and your expenses are going to be in year 1 and year 2 and year 3. And so you say, okay, great. Now, what are the main things that I need to do to get there? Okay. So first and foremost is, okay, how do I make sure I'm setting a goal? Secondly is, okay, given that goal and given what my financial plan looks like, I've got to go through an exercise to throw up on the board all the things that I think are my priorities. Now, as we all know, that is going to look like 15 or 20 things, right? If we gave everybody a virtual whiteboard right now and we said, set my priorities, everybody would throw anything up there. And I remember, and I'm sure every one of us have experienced this, think about when somebody comes to you and they see that you're kind of stressed out and you're working really, really hard. They'll say really silly things like, you just go to the movies. Just go to the movies and you'll be good. Or just take a week off and you'll be fine. And now we say to ourselves as entrepreneurs, these aliens don't get it. They don't understand. And then there's a but the but is, we have to set priorities to take the passion and the effort that we're bringing in, bring it down into the things that really make a difference to try to move your business forward. Okay. So what you start when you throw up the 15, we got to boil that down, especially in early stages when we don't have a lot of other resources. We got to boil that down to 3 things. Now, there's nothing magic about 3. It could be 2, it could be 4, don't be wrong, but it can't be 7. Okay. And in the first exercise, when you throw the 15 up there, and who knows, you might say it's 20 up there, right? When you throw the 20 up on the whiteboard, okay, you're going to go through a process of going, how the hell am I going to get this thing to 3? Okay. But the point is, if you don't, you will fail. If you just do all this other stuff and you do it maybe not particularly well, right, you're going to struggle getting towards those goals that you're trying to hit. Okay. Now, I'll caveat that a little bit with saying, when you set these 3 priorities, and we're going to tell you what it means to set a priority, right? That doesn't mean you exclude everything else. You just do them less and differently and with less of a priority. I know that sometimes people will say over, dinner conversation, oh, you just have to prioritize. Okay. What I'm going to try to do today is to help you put in place the mechanisms that actually help you prioritize, not just talk about it conceptually. Okay. So let me stop there for a second. Any questions, insights, stories that anybody wants to share before I go on?
Yep, I think we're good for now. And folks, please don't be shy.
Yeah.
We want to be
Anybody
able to
that
help.
anybody that has less to do than they have time, they should also raise their hand. So let's talk about, we throw up our 15, proposed priorities up on the board. And now we got to boil it down to three. Okay. So first and foremost, right, in a lot of early stage companies, we've got to think about, do we need some kind of financing or capital, right? Do we need some friends and family money? Do we need to go apply for a grant? Do we need to do bigger stuff like venture capital and raise money? How you finance your business um, should be something for serious consideration. There are a lot of people that have really great ideas that don't get where they need to get to because they just don't have the capital to do it, and they work very, very hard at it, but have a tough time doing it. Now, that doesn't mean that every business requires you to get capital. Many, many, many don't. But that should always be one of the top considerations is, do I have, given the plan that I've laid out, right? Do I have a priority in place to think about how I'm going to raise the capital to get there? Okay, that's number one for consideration. Number two is what I'm going to broadly call your go-to-market strategy. And for those of you who have spent any time with us at The Lonely Entrepreneur, you know, we're a little bit of a broken record around this. Your go-to-market strategy, rather, is, okay, it's a competitive world, it's a cluttered world. There are people in my industry, whatever that industry is, who have more resources and money than me. How am I going to win? How am I going to find that infamous playground where nobody else is playing, right? And if you're not setting a priority to do that, okay, you may work really hard, but are you going to ultimately win? Said differently, if we all use the same tools, if we also all use social media, if we all use email marketing, if we all use, you know, name your tool or technique, why does one organization, right, stand out amongst others when, you know, they have basically the same amount of resources? Okay, so when you think about your priorities, if you don't create the financial plan, if you don't think about how the business is going to get financed, and you don't think about your go-to-market strategy or your playground where nobody else is playing, a lot of times the rest is rounding errors, right? It's going to be very hard to be successful. Now, a lot of us work, right? Just go and work, right? We go and we create websites and we create social media and we create this. These are fundamental building blocks to success. Okay. The next part of it is your products and services, right? Like, how do I package up my products and services? Now, obviously, this is very much related to your go-to-market strategy, right? And finding your playground. But how am I developing out my products and services? What am I going to package it as? What am I going to price it as? Is another thing that you might consider as a priority. Okay. Now, people will say things like, well, what about my website, and what about my social media? And remember, if you don't really iron out what your go-to-market strategy and what your product is, you know, putting it up on social media is not really going to make a difference, right? Because you're putting something out there that might not be differentiated, and it might not be packaged or priced the right? And it certainly may not be a playground where nobody else is playing. Okay. Now, when you talk about, okay, you may be further along, you may have some of those other things set, right? That's when you do consider, okay, now I'm gonna execute on those foundations, which of course relates to things like building websites and. But if you don't get a lot of these foundations right, about why you're going to win and why you're going to go from point A to point B, setting those other things as priorities, they can take away from your ultimate success. And one of the things that we have to fight a little bit in ourselves as entrepreneurs is that creating a go-to-market strategy that is truly differentiated, that truly is a playground where nobody else is playing, is really hard. When you find it, it makes you go, whoa, and it really feels compelling about why you're going to win, right? But the natural tendency is to just work more on the widget, to work more on the product. I'm going to make my product better. I'm going to make my service better. I'm just going to continue to make it more enhanced and more this and more this and more this and more this. And that's a very natural tendency because it's something we can control. I can go control, right, the technology development process. I can go and spend time in it, and it helps me take my energy towards something that feels like being productive. But if you haven't thought through why that product or service is going to win, that go-to-market strategy that we talk about, right? If I haven't properly financed the business, right, um, then me making it better and better and better um, can be a little bit of fool's gold, right? So a lot of times, we say all the time, packaging is more important than product, and to entrepreneurs, a lot of times to us that's offensive. But what do you mean it's more important than product? I want to deliver a great product or a great service. But remember, when you go buy a car, does anybody here go to buy a car and walk over to the passenger side and open up the glove compartment and read the manual? Like, is that how you buy a car? No, something about the car makes you go, whoa. And then once you care about it, you read the manual. So enhancing your product and service and continuing to spend time on that to the detriment of the way you position it is often a really significant challenge for early stage companies. I've used the analogy before of Nike and Asics and Saucony. If you ask most runners, if you asked 100 runners, how would you rank the running shoes of those three organizations? There might be a battle between Asics and Saucony, but Nike would be a distant third. And Nike sells oodles more running sneakers than either of those companies combined. Why? Right? And this is running. This is something where you functionally feel it in every step if it's not as good, right? It's because of positioning, right? So they've won on positioning, and even when the product is deficient. Okay, so this is never to say that you're not going to deliver a great product, but in your go-to-market strategy, in finding that playground, if you're not doing it in a way, right, that is going to help you win, you can make the product the perfect running sneaker, right? And it's going to be difficult to get from point A to point B, because most of the times as consumers, whether we're a consumer as an individual or as a business, we're so cluttered that we don't get a chance to pay attention to all the differences between point A and point B. I've used the analogy before of Starbucks, right? At the time Starbucks started, there was plenty of coffee. It was cheaper, wasn't hard to get. And Starbucks, decided that they were going to charge double and have all this real estate. But what they did do, their playground, was they created a community, right? They said, hey, come here, meet, hang out. Don't even worry about the coffee. And that was different, right? Even though a lot of people didn't love coffee and it was more expensive than anything. So anyway, I think the point is that we have a tendency to work on the coffee, right? And work less on the positioning of it. And that is something that from a priority sake is super important. Now, I'm giving you the what I think are the things that people should be considering the most important priorities. Your business may be in different stages, right? So you may be further along with that. But what I would challenge everybody to say is, do you have have you set a goal? Do you have a financial plan, right? Have you really thought through your go-to-market strategy, right? These are, have you thought about the packaging of your products and services? These are the building blocks of priorities that are super, super important to get up on the board. Okay, so let me stop there for a second. Any questions or thoughts?
Michael, so I just want to actually dig a little deeper, because I had a couple of questions, and it sounds like for entrepreneurs, right? Because like you said, there are just so many things that need to be, get done on a daily basis, right? So prioritizing really starts with setting goals, and not just any goals, it's setting the right goals, right? Because that's actually going to dictate what it is that you have to do.
100%.
Okay,
if you don't align that, then it totally dictates where you're going to spend your time and where you're going to spend your money.
Right, because I think for a lot of entrepreneurs, it becomes kind of this, you're just spinning your wheels. You have marketing, you have finances, you need to find clients, you have to, come up with kind of standard documents. There's just all these things, and they start to compete against each other, right? Because okay, I have to generate revenue, which means I have to spend a lot of my time prospecting. away, but I don't have marketing material, right? And you just keep kind of going from one to the other, from one to the other without really understanding, okay, what
Yeah, well,
is really going to drive.
yeah. So B, take it in the context of you have a child and you want that child to get an A in math, or you want that child to get a C in math. You're like, not want. You're okay. I'm okay with them getting a C. I'm okay with them. That's my goal. Think of to the moms and dads out there. Would what you do be different?
Of course.
Right? Of course. Now, if you said I want them to get good grades, be wishy-washy. You'd work out and stuff like that. But setting those goals, right, is what would dictate. Well, if I'm going to do the A, then I need extra tutoring, and I got to put aside extra time, and I've got to build my stuff, and it dictates stuff. And the same thing as if you said C, right? It's a different plan.
Okay, so then can I just push just a little more because, again, this is something that is coming up. How do you know if you've set the right goals, which are then going to dictate the priorities, and it just becomes this, right?
Yeah. Listen, it comes with experience. People that are doing it for the first time, it's difficult because you are, first of all, you're under the influence of the 4 Ps, as we talked about, right? Passion, pressure, pleasure, and pain, right? And so those dictate, oh, I want to make the it better, and I want to go do it, and I want to go develop the website, and I want to go like, and that's natural, right? People are excited about what they're doing, and they want to get there faster. And so what I would say is this, V, is without these things that we're talking about, you're basically building a house without a foundation. That doesn't mean you couldn't put a good coat of paint on it, that you might not win a deal over here, and you might not try this over there, and you might not win a customer. Like, that's not to say there aren't successes along the way, but you really should be considering whether or not you've set goals, have a go-to-market strand, have a go-to-market plan, have a financial plan, really thought about building out your products and services before you go on to other stuff.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I have a question here. Are priorities supposed to be set daily, weekly, or monthly?
Great question. So priorities are the types of things that are probably set annually, or maybe twice a year, right? Priorities are not tactical things. Priorities are not the individual things you do. Now, the individual things you do support those priorities, right? But the priorities that you set, like for a year with limited resources, which every one of us in early stage companies have, really dictate how you're going to allocate your scarce resources, right? So if you have decided that you are going to pursue a certain go-to-market strategy, that dictates a whole bunch of things that you're going to do around it. Okay, the alternative, I think what you were alluding to is, if I don't set my go-to-market strategy and I don't set that as a priority, then when I go to execute, I might do a lot of stuff. I might create marketing materials, build a website, and do social media, but the result of it is not something where I win, right? So the priorities you set are big things. They are like top down, like I've set my goals for the year, right? Or my goals for the business, right, for multiple years. And then I say, okay, what are the things that I have to do? What are the major things? Well, I have to raise money. That is not something that changes every day.
Great.
Cool. Okay. Now, if you've set some of those foundations, then obviously you get to move on to other types of priorities, right? If you're further along, you're deeper into your business, and you say, okay, I want to grow my business, and I run a business that does sports camps, right? So I'm just thinking of some examples of people we've worked with. And the guy running it said, this was a little pre-COVID, but now coming back, fortunately, I run all these sports camps. There's in Long Island and New York, there's tons of demand for what I do. And, and the business is good, but I'm not growing, and I'm working really hard. And so we said, okay, well, tell us about X and Y and Z. And he's like, well, turns out I asked him, what percentage of your time do you actually spend running the camps, actually doing the camps? And he said 80%. I said, do you? You know, and the first answer from every entrepreneur is, of course, it is only me. And I'm going to break it hard to everyone out there. It's not only you, right? We all believe that we're the best at what we do because we love it and we're good at it. We've learned a lot about it. But, you know, the guy who makes every slice of pizza has a really cool shop on the corner, but never grows to be Pizza Hut. So, and that doesn't mean that's a bad thing. Having a shop on the corner can be a perfectly fulfilling thing to do. But when you think about growing, so I said, okay, here's going to be our priority. Our priority is going to be you're going to spend, instead of 80% of your time running camps, you're going to spend 80% of your time growing the business. Right? You're going to spend 80% of your time doing sales and marketing. And the first reaction is, well, I can't do that. I can't do this because I have to do this and this. And then you break it down and say, okay, given that priority, what are the things that we need to do? And so it turns out that a lot of the things that we were doing were very kind of, call them administrative, scheduling and like all this kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, so here's a question. If you hired a $35,000 a year assistant to help you, could you sell another $35,000 worth of camp registration? He's like, absolutely, I could sell 3 times that. I said, okay, so let's do that. That's part of executing on that priority. Okay, so you can see that by setting a priority of changing the mix of his time, that dictated what we were going to do. Okay, okay, so I hope, you know, people walk away, throw the 15 up on your board, try to boil it down, make sure you have the foundational things in place, right? Make sure you have some of the core elements that ultimately help you be successful in place. So let me spend a little bit of time on what it means to be a priority. Okay, we've talked about the types of priorities, but a lot of times we forget what it actually means to be a priority. First of all, as I said before, because you make these, let's say, 3 things, right, a priority, doesn't mean you exclude everything else. You just do them differently. They're not a priority. Okay, what does that mean? Is that just, you know, words coming out of Michael's mouth? No. When you set a priority, you're going to have a couple of things that go with that. Okay, one is you're going to have metrics. You're going to say, you know, how am I evolving towards that part? What is telling me whether I'm doing well or not doing well? Okay, so let's say, for example, we want our child's grade to be an A, right? We're going to be watching every week. We're going to be keeping track of test scores, right, to see whether, right? So we're going to have metrics. Within what I said is also the second thing, which is we're going to have a process, right? We're not just going to go through the day and do things. We're going to sit down once a week, and once a week we're going to say, hey, we had 5 tests this week. We did well on this one, not so well on this one. We're tracking towards getting a B, not an A. What are the adjustments we have to make to do it? Okay, so you need the metrics that tell you what you're doing, how you're doing rather, and you need a regular and consistent process that you do not miss ever. Okay, we all have more to do than we have time. We have 100 hours of work in 10-hour time, however you want to phrase it. The only way that you execute on priorities, given all the things that are going on around you, is to set them and to execute them, or put differently, operationalize them through metrics and process. Okay. And then the other part of it is leveraging your resources around them. Okay. And so that means that in this process that you're going to set up, your weekly check the grades of my kid process, right? You're going to bring to that process all the resources you can to bear that are involved in that, right? So in the context of an early stage company, that might be an advisor that I have. It might be a student I'm getting to help me. It might be a friend that is volunteering some time, right? And so we don't have teams and teams and teams of people that we can take advantage of as entrepreneurs. We have this catch as catch can group of folks that are willing to help, that sometimes work for us, sometimes are just friends or colleagues that we know, right? And But what we have to do is bring them to the process that we've set up to make it as efficient as we can to leverage those resources and bring to bear against our priorities the best and brightest that we can bring. Okay, so what it means to be a priority is to bring your best people to it, to bring a process that you measure it, and to have measurements to tell you how you're doing. Okay, a busy mom that agrees to run a charity event for a charity that she's passionate about has these crazy things like, I have too much to do, more than to do than I have time. I've got my family and I've got my job and my career and I'm doing all this stuff, and I've decided to take this charity on because it's more important to me. Well, if I don't create a process for myself and I don't have regular measurements of how we're doing, and I'm not bringing the rest of the team or the rest of the volunteers or whatever to that process, how am I going to make the charity work in the context of 100 hours of work and 10 hours of time? Okay, so setting these priorities is a start. Implementing those priorities is a function of the people you bring to it, the process you use around, and the metrics you use to implement that. Okay, you guys have heard me say this before in other of these sessions, because this people, process, metric stuff is the enabler of being able to achieve goals. Okay, one of the things that happens in the process is, in that regular process, you're digging in, you're figuring out, hopefully in an efficient way, what's working, what's not working. What does each team member and each resource, even if small, have to be able to do it? Because when you just have all this stuff going on and you're just working, you're actually not bringing your best thought to something. And part of making something a priority is that, hey, this is super important. It sounds almost cliche to say, of course, idiot, it's important, that's why it's a priority. But then you're saying, okay, if it's a priority, if it's so important, right, how do I have a process where we can actually dig into it every week and do better? If we're raising money and we're a new company, right, that process includes, do we have the right materials? Do we have the right message? Do we have, right, how are we reaching out to the types of investors that make sense? I mean, many times when people are raising money, they reach out to investors that don't even invest in their type of company, right? So how do we make sure, okay, I'm going to go into that process every week and say, okay, can somebody do some research and let's get 10 companies a week that really fit this criteria, right? So the reason why these priorities work or don't work is because you take this process and you bring all of your people to it, you know how you're doing, and then you say, okay, this week we're going to focus a little bit more on math, we're going to get a little bit more tutoring help, right? We're going to put aside a little bit more time to study, right? Like, all of these things have to become operationalized by putting in place the people, the process, and the metrics to ultimately help you deliver on your priorities. Okay, let me stop there for a second. B?
I think these are great insights. Don't have any questions right now.
Great. I should mention that in the learning community, there's a whole section about, it's called Running Your Business, and running your business is all about this process and structure and tools to be able to kind of implement some of the things that we're talking about here. Okay, these are the building blocks for getting to success. Okay, I will give you a very specific example. I'm working with a company right now that is bringing together a lot of the things that happen around when somebody dies. There's a million things that go on in addition to the tragedy event. Very, very difficult to manage because there's so many details, and it's usually done without a lot of planning. And I'm not just talking about wills and things like that. And before we had met, they had gone to a technology company and built a prototype. And, my question to them was, people, dying in the United States and in other places is actually a really big business. You have private equity firms buying up funeral homes and stuff like that. And I'm like, but okay, you're going to go and you'll build this thing, but how is it really, couldn't anybody with money just plop something up a lot quicker than you could? And so we said, well, how is we going to find our playground when nobody else is playing? And we said, we really should be bringing together not just the mundane things, but all kinds of different things. Like examples like, and again, it's in the context of death, so I don't want to mean this facetiously, but what about somebody's social footprint? Like, what happens to their social footprint? Like, so we brainstormed around this playground where nobody else is playing, and we really said, there's all this stuff. I mean, what happens with, taking care of the kids? What happens to your pets? What happens to? It wasn't just like, do you have a will, right? We did all this stuff, and now all of a sudden we've got instead of, oh, we built a prototype. What does me building a prototype mean? Time, money, effort. We built a prototype. If we get down to the end with that prototype and that prototype's not going to win the market, we worked really hard for, in this case, a year and a half, but we didn't get there. But now, and if we went to an investor might say, well, okay, it's good, but why couldn't somebody else build that faster? When we go to an investor and say, we're bringing all of this stuff to the table, we haven't built anything yet, but we have a unique go-to-market strategy. That setting that as a priority and actually doing that, using a process to create a playground where nobody else is playing and get it, you could take that to an investor day one before you've built anything, right? So anyway, the ultimate success of your organization is making sure that your effort goes to these priorities that make a difference, so that when you get there, right? And a lot of times we have to resist just doing things, like setting up social media that isn't differentiated. Okay. So take away, go back, throw your 15 on the board, try to boil it down to 3. You'll struggle with it. And with respect to the 3, put in place the people, the process, and the metrics to try to execute against those priorities.
Michael, that's great. And I actually have a really good question here that I think everybody can probably relate to. How do you optimize your calendar?
There's just a little button you press, and it all comes now.
It's called the easy button.
That's right, exactly. So again, a skill. I'll give you a couple of techniques. This is definitely in the learning community. There's a lot of different modules on this. It's in the section called Managing Yourself, ironically. So a couple of different things. Number one, the way that you manage your day matters. Okay. And there's a couple of different things to think about. Number one, do the hardest thing first thing in the morning. Okay. The thing that requires the most brain power, you should do first. Okay. We've all sat down to write the strategic plan at 8 o'clock at night. It's just really hard, right? That important customer proposal that you have to write, whatever it is, try to do that first thing in the morning. Secondly is the things you want to get done that day. Again, hopefully those things are aligned to your priorities and all the things we're talking about here. The things you want to get done that day, decide on the 5 things you're going to do, leave place for a 6th, right? And focus on getting them done. Okay. You will have 100 things that you could do, right? But think of it this way. If you focus on the other 95, you certainly don't get the 5 done. You certainly don't get the other 95 done. And you wake up the next day and you go, wait a minute, I really worked hard, but I didn't actually get anything done. So set the things you want to get done for that day, and be disciplined to execute on them and check them off the list. Okay. Sometimes you'll get 4 done and, it won't work perfectly, of course, but really create a discipline for yourself to not get distracted. In addition to that, the way you manage your time, when you're doing something that requires focus, which is many things, shut down your email, put your phone on the other side of the room. Do not allow yourself to be distracted by these kind of day-to-day things that we kind of just accept as normal. I'm working on something, I see an email, I bop into my email, or I see a text, like that's not the way disciplined people get from point A to point B. Okay. And start to optimize their time. I think with respect to your calendar, specifically, you should be putting aside time for these priorities, meaning that might be the regular meeting, right? That meeting might be with yourself, right? That meeting might just be, hey, every week at this time, I'm going to do this, right? I'm going to prospect for customers. I know for me in my old healthcare business, we were talking to the big health plans, and I really wanted to go to senior leadership in these health plans and try to tell them how important we thought, incentives in healthcare was. So every single day, at 7 o'clock at night, I would sit down for a half hour and I would call 10 health plan CEOs, right? I wanted to call them after hours where nobody would pick up the phone and I could leave a message that they'd get first thing in the morning, or their assistants would get first thing in the morning. And I used to do it literally every day until I called the top, 100 health plans in the country. So again, it's about creating this process for yourself to operationalize what needs to be done. Okay. If you don't do these things, then your day is just a whirlwind of putting out fires all day long. You got to pick your priorities for the day. You've got to have structure within your day to deal with the things that you're dealing with, and or you should be dealing with rather. And then you've got to bring some discipline to doing the hardest things first thing in the morning, making sure that you're not allowing yourself to be distracted by kind of email and all kinds of other stuff along the way.
That's cool.
Okay. Listen, everybody, this stuff is hard, right? This stuff is not the easiest stuff in the world, I can tell you. But as you can probably tell, when you start to create these guardrails for yourself, right? These guardrails are what ultimately allow you to go and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do today. I've got my regular marketing meeting today. I've got the priorities I've set for the day, right? I'm executing on all those different things. And I feel like I'm chipping away at these end priorities that are tied to my goals that are actually getting me from point A to point B. Okay, and it all should feel aligned. Now, of course, stuff comes up throughout the day, right? It doesn't always work perfectly, and you've got to be able to deal with it. But most of your day, even if it's just you, should be pretty structured around your ultimate priorities that you've set, and then the things you've decided to do that day, as you chip away against the objectives that you're trying to achieve.
Awesome. Thank you. And I just want to open it up again for, I know we had a couple of folks who joined a couple of minutes ago, and we're coming up on our hour. So just wanted to see if anybody has any questions around priorities, how to set them, how to execute them. That's our topic for today. Feel free to jump in.
So good afternoon. Thank you, Michael, for your suggestions and recommendations. I did jump in a little late, but if you were to sum it all up in your top four, how would you simplify that? As prioritizing, as you said, is not a daily, monthly, or weekly thing to do. It's more so of a annual, yearly thing to do. Because I think as a CEO or entrepreneur, business owner, we have that backwards, if that makes any sense. Like every day has priorities. It's not an annual thing. How do we know what is a priority versus a task and a to-do? And and again, those four things in regards to making sure that we simplify this process so we don't become overwhelmed with it. Thank you.
Sure. No, it's a great point. Just think of the priorities as the most important thing they're going to drive the success of your business towards your goals, right? And those are like the big picture strategic things that you have to do, like a go-to-market plan, like a financial plan, like those are the big things, right? The things you do day to day are the things that you execute towards those big things.
So priority is not a task.
Yeah, a priority is not a task. The tasks are the things you do to execute on a priority, right? So the things that you set is, okay, I've got to raise money. There's a million tasks you have to do to raise money, right? But you're saying, okay, I want to raise $1 million in 6 months, and I've made that a priority. Great. Okay. Now I have to figure out what's the process I'm going to use. What are the metrics I'm going to use that show, okay, I'm talking to this number of investors. How do I bring my people to the table, my resources to the table? And then what tactical things am I going to do day to day? Okay, great. So I have that as priority. Well, today I've decided I'm going to write my executive summary. I'm going to do my first draft of the executive summary. So what I decided to do today was align to that priority. Okay. So when you said, okay, let's boil it down to simplicity, we got to pick three of these big things, the things that we really need to accomplish for the business. Okay. That's number one. Number two, I got to put in place this people process metric stuff. What people are going to help me, what process am I going to use to keep it regularly on track, and how am I going to measure how am I doing? Okay. And then last is, given those priorities, right, and given the process I've set up, which is my weekly meeting to check in, what am I going to do today when I wake up to lead towards those? Right? Okay, I've got my marketing meeting on Thursday. I want to make sure that between now and then, I want to get this tactical task done because it's leading towards that. And then you're chipping away against your kid getting an A, right? By aligning all of those things. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that was very helpful. You actually just cleared that way up. Thank you.
Sure. And I should have said the fourth thing, which is do the hardest thing first thing in the morning. Don't allow yourself to get distracted. Listen, throughout the day, you should get distracted. You should just shouldn't do it in the midst of everything else. You should take a half hour and turn on the music and dance if you want. Like, there's plenty of times you need to get distracted and clear your head. You just shouldn't be doing it in and out of when you're writing your marketing plan. It's just not a particularly efficient use of your time and your discipline around it. So we're not robots, right? We have enjoyment. We have, we talk about, passion, pleasure, pain. Sometimes you have that in the same hour, right? So it's not meant to be robotic, but, and with an entrepreneur, it always seems to be a but. The but is the discipline you create around these things makes you a better or worse entrepreneur, plain and simple. Okay.
Great.
Remember a little bit that I'm talking about more fundamental priorities in the beginning of your business. Many of you I know are further along and you're deeper into it. You just may be setting more priorities. I'm sorry, different priorities, along the way. Those different things that you set really make a difference. And so I'll give you an example of Lonely Entrepreneur. We have our learning community, which is many of you know has all this learning in it and tools and this ongoing support, which includes, this particular section. But we said, what else more could we be doing? What else more are people asking for? And so we just launched funding sources, right? What are all these different funding sources available to entrepreneurs that we want to bring to bear? So what did we do? We said, our priority is to be, how do we help you and all the rest of our entrepreneurs get solve their problems? And one of those problems was, okay, well, I know there's all these funding sources and they're all over the place. How do I find them? So we said, well, shouldn't we be, if our priority is really making this the place where everybody can solve their problems, then what does that dictate? Great. It dictates we're going to bring funding sources into the platform. Well, now what we do every day, right? We know, okay, we're going to go look for those. And now if every Tuesday we have our product meeting, we show up on our product meeting and we say, okay, well, what are our metrics? Like, when are we going to implement those? By what date? How many? Like, it all ties together to the priorities you set. So the reason why I focus so much on those fundamental priorities, a lot of times people don't set those. And as Victoria said, they just work, right? But if you're further along, your priorities are just a little bit different. They might be, okay, I got to hire 2 people and I really got to nail that. That's a priority. Great. Well, how do I nail it? Well, I need a process. I need my people, right? What people? Well, those people might be people whose judgment you trust, who might interview for you, right? Like, every single priority has a series of tasks and tactics that you have to execute on. And those priorities that you set, the 3 that I'm suggesting, they may be different at different stages of your business. But if you don't have that first set, please make sure you give it some thought and try to go back to it.
I think, Michael, it's Victoria again. I think one of the biggest things that you just clarified is the importance of understanding your business model, your brand, and your goals and your growth trajectories and strategies behind that. Because if you don't have clarity about how you want to grow, you can't identify what those priorities look like. For example, you brought up the hiring of new employees. My goal for 2022 is to bring on new 2 staff members. And so with that in mind, how do I prepare myself? I know that I have to be net grossing a certain dollar amount to be able to sustain bringing on a project manager and an estimator onto my team. And I have to understand what that cost looks like. And so that may require for me to pull in 5 or 6 more projects for the year. So I think that that is what the clear, like the aha moment is for me today, is that you specifically indicated, okay, you have to really know what your target is and you're prioritizing and what those actions require to get to meeting that prioritized goal.
Yeah, or what I would say, Victoria, is that your goal is not, your priority isn't so much dictated by, I want to hire 2 staff members. You're hiring 2 staff members because you're trying to hit a goal, right? You're trying to say, okay, I want to grow the business by X, right? I want to grow the business by 50%. I want to grow it from $300,000 to $450,000, right? And from that, okay, what do I need to do? I need to go get 2 staff members to do it, right? So that's why your goals always dictate the priorities you set, right? Now you're already doing that calculus in your head, right? So that's why you're doing what you're doing. And then you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to make it a priority. How am I going to go about this? Well, I have friends that would be really good, have good judgment that could interview, that aren't so close to it as me. I'm going to, to be able to execute on it.
Great insights. Folks, I know we're almost up on our hour here. Just a couple of quick household items. Jamara had posted in the chat here a survey for folks to fill out if you haven't yet. And as we mentioned last week, there's been many requests for one-on-one coaching with Michael. And usually these packages start at 5,000, but given where everybody is and obviously cash strapped, and we take that into consideration and want to be able to add even more value. So we've come up with a package, $1,500 for 5 hours with Michael that you can use any way you like. And there's also a link here in the chat for a form. If you are interested, please fill it out. We'll connect with you and put that in place. So like I said, 5 hours, $1,500 to be able to utilize Michael in one-on-one consulting. So all these are in the chat for you. And of course, we're here every Friday, 12 Eastern, and looking forward to seeing everybody next week.
Great, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.